All right. Good evening. How are you? I hope your week has been well. And let me start with apologies. I was not able to share this recording last weekend. So we're sharing it this weekend. I'm your host, Wanjiku Nganga, and I had promised we shall be discussing on Wiba and employers' liability. So this is the coverage that we are going to have today. So welcome very much to this webinar. It's employers liability and Wiba. And this is a training or a record that I would like to share with all employers and the employees who are employed, because this is about you. So most people, they are told you're supposed to have a Wiba policy, and some companies, you don't know whether you are supposed to buy this Wiba policy, or you are an employee who've been hurt maybe in the course of employment, and you don't know whether you can actually get compensation from your employer. So I'm here to give you a guidance on what is Wiba and what is employer's liability and what it covers. So as usual, this is the first series, so it's also quite wide. I'm not able to cover it just in one session, so I will do it twice. So today we're going to look at the Wiba itself and also the employer's liability. Then next weekend we shall look at the claims process. Yeah. So I'll start by looking at the legal framework of the Wiba, or the work injury claims in Kenya. And I'll look at three specific laws. I'll look at the Work Injury Benefit Act. I'll look at OSHA, and I'll also look at the Employment Act, just a touch up on if you're an employee or an employer, the things that you should look at, or the laws that you should look at when you are dealing with your employee safety. So the first one is the Work Injury Benefit Act. It is an act of parliament. So you can, if you have time, you can look at chapter 236 of the Kenyan Constitution. You're going to find the act there. And this is an act that provides for compensation for the employees when they are working. When you're working, a lot of things can happen. For example, you can get injuries, or you can get ill. That is, you get diseases out of the work that you are doing, or you can contract some illnesses out of the work that you do. Now, such illnesses or injuries, they can lead to more serious stuff, or illnesses or conditions like permanent disability, or they can lead to temporary disability. Of course, when you go to the hospital, you're going to incur medical expenses. And in case of death, you need to have compensation that is related not to the work that you're doing. So basically, this is an act of parliament. It's guided by the law. So the act in itself outlines the duties or the rights of the employer and also the employee in regards to any injuries that may occur in the workplace. So this law specifically comes to protect the employees when they are injured or they are sick in the course of employment. Now, this being an act, it is compulsory for all employers. But the level of compliance that we have in Kenya is not to the standards or to the level that we'll expect to have the Wiba policy purchased or enforced by all the employers. However, being a legal mandate, it has its own consequences. If you have one of your employees who is injured, or they contract an illness out of the work that they do, remember, the government cannot force you to purchase the Wiba policy or the Wiba insurance, but it is going to compel you or force you to compensate the employee. So the purpose of you having this insurance is to protect yourself. I'll come to the benefits of the policy, of you buying the policy, because it's either you buy the policy or you have organized yourself to compensate your staff or your employees in case of injuries or illnesses contracted during their work. Now, we have now the Occupational Safety Health Act. We call it OSHA. So you can look at OSHA 2007. And this act basically looks at employers providing a safe working condition for the employees. This is whereby you're required, if you have, for example, you have in a construction site, you're supposed to ensure the place is safe, or your workplace, things are organized, it's safe for the employees. If you're supposed to provide safety equipment, you have provided the safety equipment. For example, there are those ones who work with gloves, there are those ones who work with helmets, there are those ones who wear overalls, marking areas. If you have, for example, dangerous chemicals, such things, you ensure that the place is safe, or they're organized, or it's well labeled. Basically, ensure that the workplace is both safe for the employees and also for the people who may come to visit your premises. Now, we also have the Employment Act, and this basically governs the relationship between employers and the employees in Kenya. And this also includes the injuries that may occur at work. Now, why do we say that Wiba is important for the employers to purchase? Now, for the employers, of course, number one is the financial distress. If something happens to the employees, the government is going to force you to compensate your employee. So I'll come into the claims process and how the government forces you to pay. But if you do not want to, for example, if somebody, like, for example, is awarded a claim of like 10 million, you as an employer, do you have that 10 million or even 5 million to compensate your employee? For example, let's take a construction site. You have employees in a construction site, and an employee falls, for example, from a floor, let's say even take that floor, and falls to the ground and they die, or they get injured, they sustain a permanent disability. Do you have the funds to compensate that person? That is what we call Wiba. They're going to sue you, and you're going to be compelled by the government to pay. Remember, it is not just about the injuries, there are medical expenses, and if there's death, you're also going to compensate that. So this policy helps you, instead of getting this money from your profits or your day-to-day activities, your working capital, you're getting this money out of your business to compensate a staff. That is why we take the Wiba policy to protect your financial status for the company. There's also reduced legal risks. So as I have said, this is an act of parliament. You're required as an employer to have this policy. So if you don't have it, definitely you're going to have a lot of legal charges. If you are sued, definitely, of course, this policy normally goes through the court, so you're expected to pay the lawyer fees. However, if you have the Wiba policy, takes care also of the legal cost. Now, to the employer as well, the piece, and also if the employees know that you have covered them for the Wiba policy, you can imagine how good they feel to know that the employer has taken good care of them. They are protected and they become motivated and they're happy even to work for you. So if you are an employer and you're listening to me, please ensure that you have the Wiba policy, at least for the staff. Now, for the employees, of course, it covers them for the medical coverage. So if they are injured and they go to the hospital, the cover is going to cover the medical expenses for the injuries that they have sustained from work, injuries or illnesses. Income replacements is where you have somebody is recovering at home, they are sick, and they still need their salary. So if you as an employer, you are paying this salary when somebody is home on sick off, maybe for a specific number of months. This one I'll come to the benefits themselves. Then this is normally compensated by the Wiba policy. It also gives the financial security also. If somebody is disabled or dies, of course, this money goes to there is a benefit that goes to the dependents of the employee. Now, there are 5 types of coverage that are covered by the Wiba policy. So we have the permanent total incapacity, we have the temporary total incapacity, we have death, we have funeral expenses, and we have medical expenses. So I'll explain the benefits of each. It's quite easy, it's quite straightforward. So I've just put for you the benefits that you as an employer, you're going to compensate the employee if you don't have the Wiba policy. The staff must be compensated. So what it means is that you're going to compensate the staff from your pocket or from the company business. So let's start with the permanent disability. Now, the permanent disability benefits are going to be paid to to either the employee or to the dependents of the employee, depending on the severity of the disability. And of course, these are disability that is sustained in the course of work or occupational illness. Now, what is the level of compensation? So this, if you sustain permanent total disability when you're working, you are eligible for a compensation of an equivalent of 8 years salary or 96 months earnings. So that means if you are employer here and you have an employee who has sustained permanent total disability, you're going to compensate the employee with a salary of 8 years. So if you pay the salary, for example, of you pay a salary of let's say they given 100,000. So you multiply that by 8 years. So that's what you're going to compensate. So per year, that is 12 months. We multiply by 100, that's a 1.2. Then you multiply that by 8 years. So you can imagine that's quite a lot of money that you're going to compensate the staff. So look at what can come. Don't say you can't purchase the Wiba policy. Look at what would happen in case it happens. Now, death benefit is the same. The compensation is the same. If a staff dies out of the work that they are doing or an accident out of the work that they are working for you, you're going to compensate that employee 8 years salary or a salary of 96 months earning. So the same with permanent disability. It is where I tell employers, do not say that insurance companies don't pay claims. Insurance companies pay claims. Okay, so it depends on whether you have complied with the policy conditions. Of course, I keep saying when you get a policy document, read your policy document very well, maintain the records that you're required by the insurance company. We pay claims, insurance pay claims. You need to have confidence in it, because if you don't have, you can imagine the cost of you paying an employee that money from your business, and also on top of that, you're covering the legal cost for yourself. Can be very, very expensive. So purchasing a Wiba policy is much cheaper and an easier way. So these benefits, you can see they are very expensive. They are quite high based on the salary. So you can imagine somebody who even pays an employee even a salary of like 200,000. So multiply that. It's quite a lot of money that you compensate the employee. Now, under the temporary total disability, so these are compensation that are given to the employee who sustained temporary disability out of the work that they are doing or accident from their workplace. So these ones, they are compensated a salary of maximum of 52 weeks, and this is payable to the employer as long as the employer was paying your salary. Then we have the medical expenses. So this is where now, of course, now when you sustain an injury or you contract a disease from the work that you're doing, you're going to go to the hospital, you're going to require medication, probably some medical procedures, maybe a surgery, all those conditions that require medical attention, and you are spending. So that money is payable. So the compensation is usually 100,000. Remember, sometimes we have employers who have given you a medical cover. So if you have a medical cover from your employer, so you're going to use the medical cover, but that amount that you have spent from your medical cover is going to be compensated to your employer, because they're the ones who paid the bill for you. So that one is not going to be paid to you. So this money, unless you have spent the money from your pocket, it is paid to the employer. So for example, maybe you have gone to the hospital, you have spent the money yourself, you have the receipts, that is going to be payable. But remember, when I come to claims, I'm going to explain the documentation that is very important for you to maintain when you're dealing with the medical expenses or the Wiba claims. Then we have the funeral expenses. So sometimes, unfortunately, accidents do occur or illnesses can be contracted in the workplace, and they can be fatal, or somebody can die out of the work that they are doing, or the family is able to prove that somebody died out of the work that they were doing. For example, if somebody is working probably in an environment where they're using chemicals, and maybe those chemicals, they lead to a specific medical condition, and you're able to prove that the person died out of the work that they were doing, then there can be compensation. So for the burial expenses, the policy provides for a compensation of up to 75,000. Now, we also have an extension under the employer's liability. under the Wiba policy, we call it the employer's liability. So this is an extension of Wiba. So this extension covers anything that is over and above what Wiba has paid. For example, if you go to court and the court awards the employee an award that is over and above the Wiba benefits. For example, let's say like it's occupational illness and you have been, and the policy has given a maximum limit of up to 4 million. Then what does that mean? It means that if the court awards the employee an award of, for example, let's say like 6 million, and the policy is only providing for 4 million, that means Wiba is going to compensate 4 million. And then if you have employer's liability, the other 2 million is going to be paid by the employer's liability. So basically it pays for any expenses that are over and above the Wiba limits under the policy. So that it's very important to ensure that you have apart from purchasing the Wiba policy, you extend the employer's liability. So normally this one is calculated the premium for this is going to be calculated as an extension of a certain percentage, probably about 40% to 30% around there of an extension of the Wiba premiums. Now, before I go to how you can apply for the policy, now we have a policy we call GPA Wiba. So Wiba policy is only covering the working hours. For example, you're working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So Wiba is going to cover you only when you're working. So it only covers you during the working hours. However, most employers, they extend the policy to a policy we call GPA Wiba. That means apart from the working hours, you are covered over and above the working hours. So it's called a group personal accident cover. So this one can be extended either, normally you're going to get it extended either for 3 years, 5 years, or 8 years. So for example, somebody can have the Wiba policy. Wiba is standard. It's going to cover you for the 8 years, but then you can extend to cover for 24 hours because it's a 24-hour cover. Instead of just covering your employees for just the working hours, you can extend to cover them for 24 hours. So when you cover them for 24 hours, we call that policy a GPA Wiba policy, which you can extend for 3 years. Remember, let me make it clear. Wiba will remain 8 years, but the GPA you can extend for the number of years that you choose. So you can choose either, depending on where you're buying the policy, you ask for how many years can you extend. So sometimes you can extend for 3 years, you can extend for 5 years, or you can extend for 8 years. So when you're purchasing the policy, please request for a quotation for both the Wiba plain policy and the GPA Wiba policy. You compare the two. And the most important thing that I've mentioned, please ensure you have extended to employer's liability. Now, how do we purchase this policy, or how can you purchase the cover? Normally, when you go to the insurance company, you're going to be furnished with a form we call a proposal form, or this is the form that we use to collect the data or the details from you and the company. And what we really need from the company is the list of the staff that are supposed to be covered by the Wiba policy. We're also going to request you to give the estimated annual earnings, or if you're not able to calculate the annual earnings, you can just give us the monthly salary per staff. We're also going to request for, I'll come to that. We're going to request for the occupation, what they do. Then with that, we're able to furnish you with a quotation. Now, once you get that quotation and you have decided to place the policy, you're going to submit the proposal form, and the KYC data will know your customer, that is the ID copies of the directors of the company KRA PIN, and the certificate of incorporation. And most importantly, you make payment of the premium that has been quoted in the quotation. Now, different companies will pay different premiums for Wiba. It is not standard premium. So if you're in company A, you are employer company A, and you have your friend company B, you will not pay the same premium, because this is going to be determined by several things. One, it is going to be determined by the salary. How much salary do you pay? So if, for example, company A has a wage bill of 1 million and another company has a wage bill of 3 million, you cannot pay the same premium. So the premium is going to be determined by the salary that you pay, the employee's salary that you have within the company. Now, the premium will also be affected by the nature of work. I've mentioned we are going to request you to submit the occupations. So normally you can create an Excel. You have the occupations. Normally you don't. This policy we require, for example, you have the occupations. You give us the occupations. For example, you have an accountant. You don't have to declare the names of the staff. You just need to declare. The most important thing is the occupations that you have for the employees. So you have 5 accountants, you have salespeople, you have a driver. You declare the occupations, the salaries, and the number of people in that occupation. So that is going to determine the salary. Now, the premium, sorry. Now, the other thing that is going to affect your premium is the industry or even the occupation itself. For example, if somebody is a driver, that person is on the road all the time. So the risk of that person or the probability of that person getting an injury is very high compared to somebody who is working in an office and is seated in the office the whole day. So you cannot compare that. So the premium is going also to be determined by the occupation. At the same time, the industry. For example, some industries like maybe construction industry, the manufacturing industry, the risk is quite high. These people, they're operating machines. The employees are operating the machines. And you cannot compare this probably with a company where people are just in the office, they're doing office work. It's completely different. So that also determines the premium that you're going to pay. So finally, the number of employees. So the number of employees that you have in the company, the more the employees, of course, the higher the premium. So normally you submit this as a schedule. So you make a schedule of the same. You give to the insurance company for them to be able to calculate for you the premium. Okay, so I'll reach there today. So next time we're going to look at the claims process or what happens if you are an employee and you have been injured in the workplace or you have contracted an illness in the workplace. What is the process and what is the procedure of making a claim from your employer? I'll be discussing that in the next series next weekend. For you to be able for me to be able to guide you on what you can be able to do. So thank you very much for watching. And as usual, you can be able to reach out to me in case you have any questions or any clarification on 0782 37 17 87, or you can drop me an email on pulsepolicy101@gmail.com. So till next weekend, I'm your host, Wanjiku Nganga, and I wish you a very lovely weekend ahead. Thank you and goodbye.